Am I good to go? Yeah. I'm getting a feedback. 1 sec. There we go. Okay, there we go. It's been over 3 years of the township. This is my first in-person meeting, which is surprising. So just getting used to the tech. So as mentioned, septic reinspection program. I'm going to go over some of the highlights from our 2023 inspections. As there are some new members, I'm going to go into the program a little bit more in depth too, to kind of give a brief explanation of what we do during these inspections. So background, for those of you who don't know, this program started in 1998, and we've been doing inspections ever since regarding septics. And that's not just for permitting, that's also for just reoccurring mandatory and non-mandatory septic inspections. Just a quick note, we did not do inspections over the last few years due to COVID. So from 2020 to 2022, the program was resumed this past summer in 2023. So just into some analytics from this past year, there was essentially 637 properties identified, a part of the program for this year. And as a result of us being out doing inspections, we were able to complete 595. So that gap between 637 to 595 was solely just a capacity and time strain. We were out there until end of November when the ice started to come in. So put a kibosh on getting out onto some of the water access properties. Out of those 595 inspections that were done, 82 of them were mandatory. So I'll go into a little bit more of mandatory versus discretionary next, but 82 are mandatory and then discretionary are 555. So there's a bit of a pie chart here. I'll go into again down the road here in the presentation some of the areas, but you'll see on the pie chart between Go Home, Severn River, and some of the inland lakes up in the MacTier area. This was the designations. One of the other things as well, for 2023, we were able to utilize some new software and digitize the records. In the past, we were doing hard copy inspection reports as well as spreadsheets, which worked great over the past, call it 20 years. But with this new system, we were able to digitize using some mapping that I think will certainly help us moving forward with the program. Just some more numbers from MPACT. There's approximately about 5,000 developed properties within the township, and that's with the District of Muskoka sewer properties removed. So what we did is utilizing some of the reporting tools that we have and some existing spreadsheets. We were able to look back from 1998 to current to understand the number of septic permits in reference to, as you can see here in this table, single-family dwellings, single-family dwelling additions, demos, and then sewers. So a couple of the key analytics from these spreadsheets that we want to point out is between 98 when the program started. I'll use my cursor here to kind of try to go over, but between 98 to about 2007, 2008, so over a 10-year period, there was about 1,300 septic permits issued. And in relation to the single-family dwellings, you can see the number of permits were pretty consistent around the 50 mark over that 10-year period. So what I wanted to identify and kind of bring to the attention of members is that we started the program in 98, and over that 10-year period, there was an aggressive approach by property owners as a result of the program to invest, upgrade, renew, construct new septic systems. So you can see there that those numbers indicate a large chunk of septic permits over the last 20 or so years. And you could also see on the far right, the sewer, that's just an indicator of some of the larger development, for example, Oak Bay. So what we wanted to kind of identify was that a lot of septic permits were issued over those first 10 years of the program. And now we've seen kind of those numbers, call it plateau.
If you don't mind,
Yep.
You have this little stop sharing button. If you get rid of it, we could read the totals at the bottom of your chart.
I can hide that. I thought that was just on mine. My apologies. So
Thank you very much.
There we go. The totals at the bottom. So you'll see on the number of septic permits from 1998 to 2023, and this report was pulled, I believe, in November, end of last 2023. So there's about 2,500 septic permits. So kind of in comparison, 2,500 septic permits over the past since 1998, and hypothetically speaking, there's just over 5,000 developed properties. That's nearly, call it half of the properties within the township that have had call it recent, since '98 septic permits. So that's a good indicator that the program is working. And it's a good indicator that staff are out doing inspections, and as a result of those, residents, property owners are redoing their septic systems.
Would it be fair to conclude from that over half the properties have septic systems that are more than 25 years old because they haven't replaced them?
That is hypothetically, and when you're analyzing the numbers, that is correct. One of the challenges, and I'll touch base in the presentation as well, is that based on records, we don't have the tools to analyze them. Like we have spreadsheets and we have hard copy records, which was great, and they've been used for the last number of years. But we're trying to work on digitizing records. And as you know, there was a presentation yesterday by the CBO for some staff capacity to support that records retention and records digitization for specifically Ministry of Environment use permits. So when we're looking at septic permits, that is to clarify the Township of Georgian Bay septic building permit. So it's a permit that the individual property owner has obtained through the township. MOE septic records are records that the township were not involved with. It was the Ministry of Environment, Public Health back in the day. So those records we do not have digitized, aka we can't really analyze them unless we're physically pulling out thousands of records and looking at the dates and the information. So that's actually something literally this morning that we've started with yesterday's report being passed. I appreciate that. And we've worked with our municipal software to develop a bit of a process to start scanning those in and have better records for that. So just to touch base on the different types of inspections for those of you who aren't aware. So the building code, Ontario Building Code, kind of identifies two different types of inspections when it comes to sewage systems, and that's mandatory and discretionary. So I won't go into it too in depth, but the mandatory is basically colored zones that have been identified under the Clean Water Act as a threat. And for example, the ones that we see here in the township is intake protection zones. So those are zones that are identified under different policies within the Clean Water Act. There's one in Port Severn here, as you may be aware, for drinking water within the community boundaries of Port Severn. There's also one in Rope subdivision, which is actually the locations in Tay Township, but there's a portion of that boundary that is within our township. And then there's also an intake zone in MacTier, but that's just a note. It's not identified under the Clean Water Act, just the two. Port Severn.
There's also an intake that's recently been identified for 12 Mile Bay serving Moose Deer Point.
Right, and so the Port Severn, the Rope subdivision, will be identified under the South Simcoe Source Protection Plan, which is under the Clean Water Act. So those are the mandatory ones as the jurisdiction having authority, the township. We have to do those inspections. The MacTier and then, as you mentioned, the 12 Mile Bay one aren't identified under that. So it's not essentially mandatory, but we work with our program and then our risk management official with SSEA to kind of do those inspections. So that's the mandatory.
Before we go any further, if you don't mind, I have a question. What in your one of your earlier pages, you showed mandatory inspections versus whatever the other ones were.
Yep.
What determines whether an inspection is mandatory or not?
Right. So I'll explain. So the intake protection zone. So the building code identifies the mandatory zones within the Clean Water Act and the Source Protection Plan for this area, and identifies those zones. So Port Severn, for example, here has been identified as an intake protection zone.
Not intake protection zones, but just so the 82 that were on one of your earlier slides that were mandatory were in the intake.
Those are properties. Okay. Properties located.
Okay.
Further clarification, the intake zone is basically 1 kilometer from that intake. Right. So the intake pipe out in Little Lake here, it's literally a 1 kilometer circle around that. And any of parcels within that 1 kilometer zone are identified as that mandatory.
And what's their mandatory frequency?
So the building code identifies the mandatory inspection needs to be done every 5 years. So that's what we have met that target. I think obviously I mentioned with COVID, we were kind of call it not doing inspections for the 3 years, and we didn't do any of the mandatory either during that time. But we were able to still meet our mandate under the province to do those inspections this year, which worked out. So hopefully that clarifies the mandatory. Those will be our call it priority. And every 5 years they get done. And then the discretionary maintenance program allows for us to essentially pick and choose under discretion of the township where we want to do those inspections. So as you've seen, there was 82 mandatory, and then there was about 500 and so that were discretionary. So I'll go into a little bit more on how we choose those properties. And the two main things, different types of water quality reports that we're analyzing to understand those 500 and so properties that we've seen last year. So there's the township by Mr. Rianco. There's some reporting that was there, and then the District of Muskoka lake system health report. So we're looking at these types of reports, looking at different indicators such as E. coli, phosphorus, to understand kind of the problem areas. And that's how in 2023 and historically we've also looked at those discretionary properties. So basically, as a result of looking at these reports, we were able to identify the 500 and so properties that I will go into on some of the mapping shortly. But in terms of septic reinspection, what is it? So we're going out to properties both for mandatory and discretionary. We're doing a full non-invasive inspection of the septic system. So that's looking for things like signs of failure, ponding effluent, non-approved hookups, exposed tanks, malfunctioning tanks. So all the issues that you would imagine would come from a failing septic system, that's what we're looking for. In terms of unsafe sewage systems, some of the most common issues that we see in the past and this past year was lack of maintenance. So that's things like overgrown septic beds and trees and weeds and stuff growing down into the leaching bed. We're looking at lack of maintenance, so people not pumping their tanks out, things overflowing, broken or unmaintained sewage pipes. So as you know, it gets cold up here and there's lots of sleds in the wintertime. A lot of people will not understand where their septic system is and will run snowmobiles over it or ATVs and lawnmowers, and things get cracked up and people don't inspect their septic systems as nearly as often as they should. I'll just go through some pictures quickly here so you can see some photos of exposed pump chambers. So the building code obviously requires certain things, part of the system to be done. One of them is having a sealed pump chamber, so that way if there's a failure with the pump system or whatnot, you're not getting effluent sewage leaking out into the environment. Broken and exposed tanks. So again, as I mentioned, you get some of these pipes. A lot of times when you're up in Go Home and some of the northern parts of the municipality, there's no soil, it's all rock, as you know, and some of these pipes are just laying on top of the rock, so they're pretty exposed. And without proper inspection and maintenance every year, things go wrong, obviously. And you can see some of the cracked concrete tanks and whatnot. On the unmaintained septic systems, some forests over leaching beds here. Sometimes people think it's a great idea to build decks over their beds, and just lack of maintenance simply. So these are the types of things that we're looking at when we're going out. And we're speaking with homeowners about these issues and how to rectify them. So some of these unsafe tanks, metal tanks that are rotting, and non-approved tanks. So that's a propane tank that's being used. Non-approved hooked up like showers, discharges. People don't want to plumb their sinks and whatnot into their septic system, and they just run out. So these are all the things we're looking at. If we're coming across a system where we don't know where it is, there's no records. Back to the point made earlier, there's a lot of systems where we don't have any records, there's no use permits, it's just the septic system is completely unidentifiable from a records end. So we're doing things like working with the homeowner to identify where that septic tank is, and if there's signs of failure on a property, for example, ponding of effluent, ponding of water on top of the bed and whatnot, we have what's called a dye test that we complete. And we were able to complete some of those this summer. I'll go into some more of the enforcement analytics after. But a dye test is essentially putting call it a super concentrated dye puck into a septic bed. It's completely environmentally friendly, and the dye is essentially able to go through the system. And through that process, over time, we're able to identify if there's any effluent that's making its way into the environment where it's not supposed to. And then you can just see some pictures there of that dye. When it comes out, it almost looks like an oil. It's just got a kind of a sheen on it that is easily identifiable from the eye. Okay, so I'll go into some mapping, and then following the mapping in terms of the identified areas where we worked this past summer, I'll go into some of the enforcement stats. But as I said, 595 inspections. Go Home Lake, we were able to do a total of 240. So you'll see some of the tables there, Four Seasons Bay, Hart Bay, and Miners Bay. So the table identifies a number of inspections in each area we're able to do. So we focused on a portion of the southern end of the lake. Again, back to water quality analysis. These were the areas that were inspected under the water quality reporting and identified those increased measures. We did have some on Gala, not Gala Lake, Gray Lake up on Go Home, but again, we weren't able to access that area this summer. So MacTier, Myers Lake, and Stewart Lake we were able to tackle, about 90 on Stewart and about 60 on Myers Lake. You can see all the properties that we inspected are identified in red on the mapping. Gala Lake, a total of 45, so we did the whole lake there, all the parcels on Gala. And Severn River, a total of 111. So basically from the chute all the way up, all the township parcels. Just a quick note again, reiterate, we were unable to finish about 40 on the Severn River. So that's the discrepancy in numbers of letters compared to the inspections. Back to the mandatory. So this is the parcels identified within that 1 kilometer radius for the intake zone. So these were the bulk of the 82 mandatory inspections completed. The Rope subdivision, there was just a couple little islands out on Georgian Bay, just to the south of Port Severn, and on just at the end of Oak Bay, there, Twin Islands Trail, there's a handful of properties. There's some mapping there for the intake zone, so you can see the top blue is the Port Severn, and then the bottom is that Ropes, so just for reference. Enforcement, so the mapping, I know it's kind of tough to see, I have to zoom in, but the red indicates all of the properties that required septic repairs, so it was pretty consistent across the Port Severn, Go Home, Gala, and MacTier. There was kind of a consistent number of properties that were inspected and required repair. You can see some of the numbers here. Overgrown septic beds, there was about 16 letters sent. There was another about 16 letters sent for repairs required. That'd be things like septic pipes not hooked up, cracked tanks, those types of things that I showed pictures of earlier. We did 4 dye tests, and then there was 2 orders issued. And an order is not the goal of the program to go out and issue orders on property owners. We're having conversations with people. It's more of an education approach that we like to take. And when we don't get compliance or we're unable to get a hold of people, if we send letters and so on, unfortunately, the last tool we have is to issue those orders. So that's why those were issued.
Cody, just flip back if you don't mind. So on the repairs required, what do you require if you if a repair needs to be done? What confirmation do you need that it's been done?
Right. So we're a part of that. So we're, I guess, process-wise steps. We're going out to do the inspection, the initial inspection. If there's a repair required that's identified during that, some sort of issue, a failing septic system or a pipe, whatever, we're usually sending a letter first to identify if we're not making contact with the owner on site, which a lot of these properties were not. So we're sending letters out with contact information to get a hold of the township and identifying the issue. Usually that individual will respond back to the township. We will have a conversation. They will most likely get the work done. So that's like, for example, if a pipe's broken, they'll have a plumber come out, repair it. And then we are going back up to do an inspection a second time. So there was probably, I don't have that number here, but I think it was about 60 something inspections that were completed as a second inspection essentially. And sometimes depending on time of year, and we're not going to go up, launch the boat and go all the way up to the top and go home to look at a coupling on a pipe. So sometimes pictures can be sent if it's very minor in nature. So that's kind of the process. Once the repair is completed, then we're essentially marking that system inspected, it complies, everything else is good. So that's kind of the enforcement numbers, the locations. I just want to touch base on 2024. So all those reports and stats were for last year. As I mentioned, with modernization for this upcoming 2024, we are looking at modernizing records from hard copy to digital. So those MOE permits, I think, are going to be crucial in us being able to identify kind of all of the, in quotations, at-risk systems. They may be functioning properly, but they're older systems. We may now have records. So we're trying to get that information through some records and our software that we're using. As you've seen too, the GIS tool, a lot of you are familiar with the GeoHub mapping. Those maps came from our town suites. So the actual system that we're using to store these inspection reports and track data and whatnot, there's a mapping tool within that we're using. So that's going to be super helpful to identify properties. We're going to take that information and hopefully kind of try to develop a multiple year kind of plan. There's going to be a lot of properties to inspect. reoccurringly. So the idea is hopefully we can kind of develop a game plan with those records. We've historically done about 500 to 700 inspections a year, and that's been a big part of it because we just pick an area and tackle it. We're using some of this data and analytics to kind of refine those properties. It might mean going to one property in this bay and this property in another bay. So it might mean, just as a kind of a heads up, it might mean reducing that number of 600 inspections down to 100 or 200, depending on the geographical location. But hopefully, with the data that we're able to use, hopefully we can be more strategic and specific on those properties. So 2024 also, we're just doing some public education, enhancing that after COVID. We kind of took a bit of a hiatus on that. So we're doing some collaboration right now with some of our external partners, environmental agencies and whatnot, that you all may be familiar with. Some public education stuff. I've been working with our comms department on website changes for both actually septic reinspection and some of the water quality data that we have, making it a lot more user friendly for people to come to our website and to access that information. We've started to develop some tools for this summer. Currently, right now, and back on the processes of the septic reinspection, we don't provide property owners with an actual inspection report or information on their septic system in the past. So hopefully we're going to kind of provide some of these handouts and doorknobs, door hangers, to allow residents to understand that we were there. Because, for example, this past summer we sent out about 600 letters, and we still get people that are calling in to say, hey, did that inspection get done or whatnot? There isn't, it's tough to keep that line of communication with 600 residents. So hopefully these door hangers will allow us to, identify that we were there, systems in good standing, requires further follow-up. And then we're going to work with our comms department. There's a QR code on here, and hopefully it's going to point towards our septic reinspection page on our website, where we'll have different reports from previous years, mapping, just more user-friendly, accessible information for people. And then it's also going to have some tips and tricks on maintaining a septic system and water quality and so on. So just some of the website stuff here that we're working on, and linking some of these other pages under the source protection plan and the district's water quality monitoring and so on. So that's kind of our go plan for 2024. So that's it for this report for me.
Well, thank you very much for that. A lot of information. And I can tell you, I personally will be thrilled when you get 5,272, if that was the number, of properties in your database with reference to what sort of septic systems they have, including the age and all that sort of thing. I think that'll be fantastic.
That's the goal. It might take a few years, but
yeah, but you can't complete the goal if you don't start it. So I think that's excellent. With that, I got to see a whole pile of hands in front of me. So away we go. We're going to start with Councillor Cooper, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Avery. Or is Cody okay for you today? Cody's okay. It's really a two-part question. One is related to the information, excellent information that you gave us. I just wanted to understand a couple of things. You gave some stats at the beginning about mandatory versus discretionary. Maybe you explained it, but I didn't catch it. What's the difference?
Yeah, I can just briefly explain it from a simplistic approach. So the mandatory inspections are done as a result of the building code identifying that we have to do those inspections.
And there's a problem, you mean?
So essentially there isn't a problem identified, but the Clean Water Act, so not the township, the province, has identified these areas of concern, and that would be what's called an intake protection zone for the township. So the drinking water well that we have here in Port Severn, there's an intake out in Little Lake. Within a kilometer of that is those areas that are mandatory.
Versus
discretionary is as simple as it's discretionary. We have all the discretion in the world to pick these areas. That's the difference between mandatory and discretionary.
We have the discretion to do inspections wherever we choose. Correct?
Exactly. And the mandatory we have to do every 5 years.
Yes, but it's very nice that we have discretion to. Okay, just wanted to clarify that. And the stats were interesting. I think one of the things that I observed was that we had massive growth in terms of septic approvals between the years that you identify, which was, basically from 99 or 98 to 2007, it was every year it was well over 100, 150, that kind of thing. And it seems to, there's a couple of years more recently that are high volume, but a lot of it's much lower than that and maybe more manageable, but it's also giving us an indication that, guess what? There aren't as many places that you can put a septic bed, hopefully, because the truth of the matter is that every time we put in one, once in a while we put one in that is risking our water quality and the environment. So I just wanted to say that it was interesting to see that the lay of the land has settled down a little bit. So I wanted to thank you for all the stats, but the second part of my question, excuse me, relates to, just wanted to make you aware that over the last 10 plus years, I've been sitting on the District of Muskoka Council, and one of the things that I sort of focus on, and more recently on a committee on which I sit, is the best-in-class inspections for the District of Muskoka. And the reason I raise that with the District of Muskoka, and I'll talk about the deaf ears in a minute, but that I don't know whether people realize, but in the District of Muskoka, 80% of the residences are not on a sewage system, they're on septic beds. 80%. But guess what we focus on in the District of Muskoka? Sewage treatment only. So over the last 10 years, I've suggested that one of the things we could do at the District of Muskoka and set an example for all the lower tiers as well is identify best-in-class inspection systems that are available or underway in many parts of the world. I think there are certain parts of the U.S., for example, I think Wisconsin maybe, where there are some pretty, more rigorous septic inspection programs. And I have been asking for 10 years that be dealt with for district-wide. Unfortunately, that 80% suggestion has fallen on deaf ears. There's nothing happened yet. And so if that's happening, maybe we have to do it ourselves. And my suggestion is, I think we're doing some wonderful work here, but my suggestion is that we should consider taking a look at what are the best-in-class programs available around the world. And I don't know that we want to have hugely expensive programs, but there may be some very efficient things that we could do and learn from, get some learnings from elsewhere to apply here. So that would be a suggestion for our planning department, or sorry, for our building department and your department. That's a suggestion one. And suggestion two, in terms of a focus at the moment, specifically where there may be problems, you've identified all sorts of different things. The only thing that I would suggest is that there were some systems that were put in place in the last 15, 20 years that did not necessarily keep in mind the high water mark that occurred to us in 2020. And I could show you a few of them on GeoHub and have driven by them and have pictures. And basically in 2020, some of them were flooded out. Maybe not the entire system, but at least the weeping bed or the mantle. And that's problematic. That's our environment. That's the water that people drink in the area. And we need to do something about that. So I'm sure that you've had maybe some reports, but there's a broader way to look at that and that or this, and that is that maybe there are some very easily identified locations, including islands that were H2 that have a septic system on them now, and somebody may have built a little wall around the septic bed, but guess what? The water was flowing over it in 2020. That's pretty serious. So I would just encourage that we maybe think about A, learnings from others, and B, let's focus in on where there could be some very significant problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pedko, please.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship, just a couple of questions, Cody, if you don't mind. So I guess one of the questions, and maybe you don't know yet, is, and perhaps the CBO can also help with this, where in 2024 are you going to target? Are you continuing the inland lakes like you were doing in 2023? Or are you moving off into the bay?
right now we haven't narrowed it down, but I know there is, because we didn't do any Georgian Bay properties this year, I know that there is a wish to focus somewhat on the bay. So right now, that is our goal to some point, but what we really want to do before we decide and move forward with which direction we're going to go, we'd like to get these records in and then take a look at everything, including the water quality, and decide from there which we think is the best action.
And then, very briefly, so you've looked at the Wienco reporting previously in terms of what areas have high E. coli and coliforms and phosphorus, and you've targeted those bays, especially in Gohan Lake, I noticed. Have you gone back to recorrelate to see if the septics that needed remediation correlated to actually where the high coliform and E. coli was, or is that still to be done? Because I guess you don't have the 2024 report from.
No, those reports generally come a few months down the road, but even over the years, a lot of the time, we don't know if it is anything to do with actual septics that's causing the water quality problems. A lot of times now, and sitting through a lot of the water quality information sessions and speaking to people that have come, they're coming to a conclusion that a lot of it is climate change. So not that it's going to, change how we do the program, but there's no direct response as to what is causing. And I know a few of our counselors has brought that up recently, that getting to that point is finding out what's causing the actual water quality issues. But that's a whole different road we're going down.
Okay, and then if the chair can bear with me for a second, just two more questions.
You haven't hit the 2.5-minute mark, but you're getting closer.
Okay. The answers are taking too long. The pump outs, can you identify when you're doing an inspection that you're thinking this septic tank needs a pump out, and do you recommend it, or do you make that part of the remediation?
So the septic reinspection program is a non-invasive inspection, so we're not actually going around to every property and pulling lids and inspecting inside the tank. To do an actual full inspection of a septic system, hypothetically, you do need the system pumped. A part of the program, we're doing public education, so we're pushing people that, you need to have your septic pumped. Sometimes people will come across, they haven't pumped their septic out in 15 years.
Yeah.
A lot of it obviously has to do with the usage of the dwelling and whether it's a cottage or a full-time home, but we are pushing people to do that, have their systems pumped. If we see signs of failure in a tank or in a bed, there are tools that we have. We didn't do it any this summer, but we do have a tool which is called a sludge judge. So it's as simple as it sounds. You check the amount of sludge that's in a tank, and that's a good indicator whether it needs to be pumped or not. But we didn't have to use that tool this summer. But the rule of thumb is there is public education materials out there that identify that you need to have your system pumped every 3 to 5 years. One of the things is just to kind of correlate back to my report, and for 2024, as you all know, short-term rentals are a big hot topic right now. And in some of our public education tools, we're putting some resources out on how to identify when you need to, pump your system and usage compared to, a seasonal dwelling compared to a short-term rental that's having 20 people every weekend. Hopefully that's not the case, but, identifying to the public that those are the parameters that you need to ensure that your system's functioning.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, this goes back to your the reinspection program and the maintenance that's looked at, and what you guys actually do when you're on site, and the discretionary inspections. I had an inspection, I'd say within the last 10 years, maybe 12, and it wasn't you, Kaylee. So I'm curious to know, because the person came out, looked at my septic pipe, which is quite long, indicated where repairs were required, which was fine, and photos were what was requested after the repair work was done, which is fine by me. But they never went down and looked at the septic bed or the site of the septic bed or the site of the tank. How rigorous, or how much discretion is given to the person doing the inspection?
I can't speak on behalf of other inspectors in the past and what they've done in terms of the approach that from what I can understand over the years, it's like I said, it's a non-invasive inspection. So we're not pulling the tank lids off. We're not digging up the filter bed. We are looking for signs of failure. And when you're inspecting a system, if you're doing 600 inspections a year, you can probably tell in the first 30 seconds of walking on a property whether the system's functioning or not. So we're looking at basically the system as a whole, from where it discharges out from the dwelling, the pipe, the tank, and the filter bed. And obviously that's for a general, leaching style bed. There's holding tanks out there. There's gray water pits and all these other types of systems that we're looking at as well.
Okay. I asked this, aren't you going to look at anything else? And they said, nope, not necessary, and left.
That'd be interesting because that wasn't us.
It wasn't Cody. I know that.
The only other person would have been me. So
we can talk offline. Anyway, I'm happy to see that this is all part of the requirement for the inspection. Anyway, thank you.
Is there a mystery septic inspector in our township? All right. Just as a clarification, because it's come up in conversation, when people raise their hands, they go on my machine in a certain order. And when I first looked up, I had Cooper, Predco, Jarvis, Bocek, Hazelton is how it showed up. And so I'm not trying to pick favorites. I'm just trying to go through the order I saw them.
I understand that, but on his screen and my screen, mine's still number one.
I can't explain how this software works.
I can confirm that's the order on his screen. It also doesn't match mine. I don't know.
So I don't know how this is.
He's not saying the main word of the problem. This is the communists.
But in other words, what I see up there is what I see on my screen.
You should be looking at
Okay. Anyway, with that explanation, I'm going to Councillor Bocek, followed by Councillor Hazelton, please.
Thank you. And Kaylee, I'm going to address this to you. The non-invasive septic inspections you do is basically go onto the property, make sure there's no pipes disconnected, make sure you're not walking through slop on the bed, anything that is visually you're inspecting. So my question is, when you receive an application to add bedrooms or add bathrooms or a bunkie or whatever, the septic becomes a part of it and you have to make sure that it's in compliance. Could we not, that anytime an application for a building permit comes in, say it's for a deck, or say it's for something that has nothing to do with adding bedrooms or bathrooms or anything, you already have an inspector going out there. Could we not do that physical walk around check? Because we said it's discretionary. So if the guy puts in an application, you have to send somebody out to look at a dock application. You're already there and you say, well, while we're here, we have the discretion to walk over and just make sure your septic bed's working properly, and then you can tick that one off your list. I'm just wondering if there's any interest in that.
it's a good idea. Building code tends to not like us using our powers for two separate things. So you kind of have to look at septic reinspection as one, building inspection as another. Because they're applying for a building permit, is it possible? Probably. Only other thing it's going to do is cut into our time during the day. This time of the year, obviously can't see much, but in the summer when we're busy and we're going from site to site, our first concern is more the safety. We want our inspectors concentrating on the job at hand and ensuring that the building code is being met and that safety, everything's being met, because if not, what the problem is we don't need them worrying about, okay, this is all the inspections I have in a day. And sometimes those inspections, you'd like them to be longer, but because you have so many, you have to do what time allows. Throwing an extra inspection in there to go on something, even if it takes 5 minutes, can actually add up to the amount of the day. So it's something that, could be possible in our less busy times, but I'll definitely look into that.
Yeah, my thought was that, you have a boat going out to an island to check on something small, you can inspect or do the walk around, as opposed to having the guy next to you in another boat going out to an island. So you're using his time to go out and do a septic reinspection where you already have a licensed person there on the property that could do the inspection. So I was just thinking of efficiencies, is my thought.
If I could add a point there, we So for example, on Go Home, most of those properties are water access. We were utilizing our time to the best of our ability. If we did have inspections up there, I would be the one that would be going doing the building inspections and completing those septic inspections after. Part one. Part two is that if we're on a property doing a building inspection and the septic is visibly failing and there's effluent ponding everywhere, we're obviously going to address it. It's not going to be something we're just going to turn an eye to. But just again, on the side that Kaylee mentioned from the building code, there is a distinction of inspections and your powers and the different hats you wear when you're on a property. So we aren't turning our eye to failing septic systems when we're doing inspections.
Good.
For sure.
There's consideration that this could be something moving forward for efficiency purposes is more of the reason. Thank you.
Councillor Hazelton, would you like to speak?
Last but not least. No, but I first of all, thank you very much for the report. I love data. You had a lovely grid in there. Can you share that grid with us? Which grid? It's the big grid with all the numbers in it. And I have a question about it, if I may. No, you don't need to put it up on the screen. I'm just saying, could you share it with us, send it to us? Then the next question I had was, you got the number of SFD, that single family dwelling, and you've got the number of add and then number of demolished. I'm wondering, should those numbers add or there's no relationship between them? Okay. Thank you for that grid. That was one thing.
Well, the entire point of putting that together was so you could kind of see, because some of those new septics or replacement septics are going to be in relation to development, like possibly existing new or whatnot. So we were just trying to show that it wasn't all just systems being replaced, that there is development that comes into play. And that's why we showed the sewer as well. So you just didn't look at dwellings and septics and think that, it was, you subtract one from the other and that's how many were replaced.
Great. Next question. You had an image in there with an open end of the tank, and you said something about if you have an open tank, that's a fail. Is that? Did I read that correctly?
I'm not too sure if that was stated in there the way it was mentioned, but if there is cracked pipes, open tanks, or whatnot, to classify it would be call it a failed inspection. We're not providing inspection reports pass or fail per se, but it would definitely be what we consider as an unsafe sewage system that we would address and have to be fixed.
So I get it that the things are cracked, but there's up on Georgian Bay, there's a lot of tanks that are sitting on top of the rock. Before something drains off into a tile bed someplace, you're never going to be able to cover and bury the tank. Is that, am I hearing you wrong there?
Yeah.
Just to clarify, are you talking the pump chamber or the septic tank? I have pictures of.
I mean, does the pump chamber need to be covered? Does the tank need to be covered?
It needs to be sealed, correct?
Sealed.
Yeah.
But
not covered. Sorry, to clarify, not
Okay.
covered with earth material. It needs
Yes.
to be sealed from the elements.
But possibly, depending on some of the plastic tanks, if their manufacturer specs requires it's backfilled, they're bringing in backfill.
Got it. Okay, just because there's a lot of properties up there that I can't imagine how they'd ever cover them. Well, no, they're plastic tanks, but they're 100% exposed. Anyways, don't take this as a challenging question, but I want to ask you, what does the building code say about when you need to pump your tank?
It doesn't. Well, it doesn't say in terms of a time frame. So it doesn't say every 3 to 5 years.
Right.
It's based on the level of your sludge, your layer.
Thank you. So you just said earlier that you're encouraging people to pump their tanks. You repeated the phrase every 3 to 5 years. This is really false information that has really got no value, no relevance in our community and cottage country. If you talk to septic installers, they will tell you that in Georgian Bay, rarely they find 20 or 30 years of use, you're still working fine. And so your comment, which I loved earlier, of take a septic stick and test the sludge level. So I had one neighbor who was listening to this 3 to 5 years thinking, oh my God, I should go get it my pump tanked. And I said, what the hell are you doing? I got a septic stick, go test it. And he tests it. And he goes, oh my God, there's no sludge. And then his neighbor says, well, I'm thinking about getting mine done too. And he goes, well, here, take the septic stick. They washed it off before they sent it back. That was a little late and whatever. They're not in the lake, probably. But the point I'm trying to get here is in Georgian Bay, when we have our septic installers who are responding to and dealing with things, if they're not being mistreated, they're probably good for 20 or 30 years. For us to repeat that phrase that should be extracted, taken out of all of these material that's out there. It's absolutely false information. So I just want to get on my little soapbox and make that statement, because when the building code says 1/3 sludge, why are we telling people 3 to 5 years, especially when it's going to bankrupt people out on the bay, because it's going to cost $1,000 to $1,500 to have your tank pumped?
I think what was kind of misconstrued was that's more for a regular full-time household, which is what Cody did say. So
Okay.
the full-time, full use, and again, we all know that's still not building code. That's still not building code, right? But that is, I think, a general practice that that a lot of people will use for, family 4, family of 6 that live in a house that are there constantly using it. We can easily put that information on our website that it is required by building code that your tank is pumped out if the slums, the sludge, and yes, is more than 1/3 the capacity of the tank.
So
We can put that in there somewhere. A lot of these links that are going to be on this may say that, and we can also put a disclaimer on our page going, look at, if you read this, these are just recommendations, not requirements, and the reasons why. We still want to use all these links on our webpage because a lot of them do offer a lot of very good information and a lot of good education. And like I think I've had a conversation with you before, I think everyone, especially counselors, should encourage your associations during your summer meetings or whatever to have somebody qualified come in and talk about septic maintenance, or talk about like taking people to show them around a tank, to show them around an effluent filter. Some people have them, some don't, but just general maintenance things and discussions on what you should and shouldn't be putting when you flush the toilet, when you're dumping things down your sink. Like, wipe out the grease. You're going to save yourself a lot. It's still going to get in there, but the more you wipe out, the more headache you're going to save yourself down the road, because we all know, especially when you're on an island or water access, how much it costs to repair, how much it costs to replace. The cost is crazy, and we're not even to the environmental part yet. So I think education, and that's a big part of where we are trying to go, is push with a lot more education. But I think if the association stepped up and had somebody come in, because there are a lot of good companies. I think you're aware of some of the people that do these kinds of, educational systems. Have them come in, have them, everybody meet at one person's property, and they'll go through a septic and they'll show you what you should be looking for if you think you're having a problem.
So thank you for that. And I think education is great. My only bugaboo here is the 3 to 5 years thing is not education, it's fear. And my neighbors are terrified that they're going to have a problem, and they think 3 to 5 years, I got to go do something, spend a ton of money, when in fact, all they really need to do is get that little septic stick.
Yep.
Oh, yes, good. No, not good.
Yeah. And like I said, we can definitely put something like that as a disclaimer, or more correct information on our actual webpage to help that out. And we do, I think you said you have a sludge judge, and we do as well. Depending on when, if it's needed, like if somebody's unsure, we'll be happy to help them out.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I know from personal experience, I had my septic pumped out after, I think it was 8 years, because the neighbor had to have theirs pumped out, and there were all the trucks there. And they said, they were happy to pump it out, of course, but no, it wasn't necessary. And that was after 8 years of seasonal use. So yeah, I fully accept that.
Tell you, the reason why I'm so hyper-focused on this, we bought our cottage from Uncle Peter. We wanted to do the right thing. We had the tank pumped out. And in the wintertime, because of groundwater, it collapsed the ends of the tank. And then the tank was deformed. And we had to live that way until we fully replaced the entire septic system. And so we should have listened to we should have not paid attention to that. Oh, just buy, you should probably pump your tank. No, you shouldn't.
And when you do have to do it, doing it at the right time of the year is important as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Councillor Cooper.
I promise this will be 10 seconds, not 2.5 minutes. I just wanted to, okay, you can count. I wanted to say I completely support, this is shocking, Brian, but I could completely support the suggestion that came forward from Councillor Bochek with regard to sort of using the inspection process to what I would call sort of a red flag process. In other words, a red flag action item. As opposed to an inspection, just a red flag action item. Hey, somebody needs to get out here and take a look at this. We haven't got time to do it, but, and you're probably already doing that, but I think it's, you know, if you're out there anyway, use that boat trip for a good reason. So,
You know,
I just want to encourage that. So thank you.
I want to say every single building inspector that I've ever met that's worked at this township has told me they've gone to a job with their eyes open. And sometimes neighbors get flagged. That the neighbor had no idea, but they said, wait a minute, we should follow up on that. And I know that follow-up takes place. So I think our building inspectors are serving us well because they do travel with their eyes open. I hope that's a fair statement. Councillor Predko, you want an additional remark?
A short remark, please.
Yeah.
I did want to, my last go around had a comment about education, which I'm very glad you brought up because I think there's an opportunity not just for improving our septic systems, but also improving the time it takes for the inspections if people are properly educated and have well-maintained systems. Is it feasible or helpful to have a flyer put together that you could leave in marinas or other places in the township or on the website to give people the heads up, you know, septic reinspection is occurring on a rotating basis. Make sure you're mowing the grass, you're connecting the pipes, and
The coffee pot is on.
Coffee pot is on, and just to kind of help see if you can decrease the number of, you know, surprise visits that would then require you to go back a second time for especially things like maintaining the lawn.
Right. So for starters, everybody does get a letter that we're coming to. So we do a mass mail out. Yep. So we do a mass mail out saying we're coming. And by the way, if you have any questions of what's going to happen, I think the last time we sent them out, it actually was pretty descriptive of the program itself. That's why we're redoing the web pages.
Okay.
Because at first we were actually going to get bags and do handouts and things like that. And then we thought, well, that's not very environmental. And how many people are going to actually look at it? Or are they just going to turn around and throw it out, right? Like the flyers you get in your mail. So that's why we kind of turned it down to the door knocker approach, like that door hanger that we're going to get is going to throw in there. So that's going to have like the web address and like the QR code that you can scan to start to get them in information. And as this goes on, you know, it's going to be an evolving project. So, you know, we can always change it. We can always update links. We can always put in disclaimers or better information, and we can always go in a different direction where, like you said, we can, you know, talk to marinas and say, hey, do you mind if we leave this here? Yeah. You know, anything that's going to make something better, to me is always a good change.
Sure. The township has a big board that's never has anything on it at the Miners Bay launch.
Yep.
It could have a big poster, you know,
absolutely.
Check your septic.
Absolutely. That's a good idea. And you know what, we'll do that. And that's something else, you know, that we can put out on social media. We can get together with Jen and Trish and form something nice up, something that we can print out and put out and around, and then something that we can constantly put out on our social medias.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Jarvis suggested the public library could have a lending septic stick that could be shared across the township. Thank you.
I thought we were doing so well. Councillor Bochek?
Clarify, commercial properties in the township of Georgian Bay, which are on waterfront, marinas, campgrounds, all that kind of stuff. They're not under our auspice of inspection. They're under the MECP. We know that the MECP and most federal and provincial agencies don't even bother with us anymore. I mean, I owned a commercial property here for 10 years. MECP never came out, 24 rooms in a septic bed. Is there anything you can do or anything the Township of Georgian Bay can do to notify the MECP of commercial properties you feel maybe not up to standards? Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. I know we have one ongoing now with MECP for one of our commercial properties where they are actually doing a full review. So if we have any kind of issue that's not in our jurisdiction, we definitely forward it along to them if we have concerns. I know luckily the person that's looking after our area actually just changed, and I'm very positive feelings towards it. I've gotten instant response. There's been no waiting, and they've actually jumped ahead of me. When I was trying to set up a meeting, I sent them one email, said this is what's going on, and by the next day, their response, I responded back, and they had already set up a meeting with the people. So, yeah.
All right. We have talked septic for 1 hour minus 2 minutes. I'm going to fill those 2 minutes and we're going to move on. And I'm going to fill them by saying thank you very much. I think the fact that we spent an hour on this not only demonstrates our appreciation for your report, but also our high level of interest. I mean, we often talk about, you know, the environment being a top priority, and one of the key components of that environment is water quality. And we don't want our human activity here to be damaging that water quality, and the septics is one of the main vehicles for preventing that. So I really appreciate your work. Really looking forward to that database getting filled, because I think that'll be very helpful and informative. And say thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Council, after that, we have monthly department highlights from the senior management team. And are we going to do septic all over again?
No.
Okay.
Oh, we have a resolution.
Oh, sorry. I'm supposed to do a resolution. I apologize. Moved by Councillor Predko, second by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved, the council received the report regarding the 2023 Septic Reinspection Program year-end report for information. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Avery. Okay, thank you. All right, now, senior manager team. Are you the leader of this system? Let's go.
Considering my department starts with B, I'm at the beginning.
Mine starts with S.
Yeah. So this is not really, sort of similar in a way. You will be receiving our actual building department year-end report. I'm just waiting on some final numbers from the finance department, so hopefully that will come. I was hoping next week, or next month, but that's got to be done next week. So you're going to get a shortened version for the month of January this year. If you looked, the original thing was a lovely report I found in our system that will actually show you our value of construction for permits that were issued in January. And you can see the number of single families and so on that go through that. There's also a little thing that told you we did 45 actual building inspections in the month of January. Now, this report was done a little before the end of the month, so there were a little more than that. The following that is a bit of monthly objectives that you can see will continue until obviously they're complete. Some of these have been completed already. I'm not sure if you want me to go through them. Obviously, orders of complaints. We're working on some guides for the public that will make it easier for them to apply for permits on their own. So a deck guide, secondary suites, which is something that's becoming a little more popular, more in the southern municipalities, but it is working its way up here. Updating our occupancy checklist for the public so they have a better understanding of what they need when either they want occupancy on their building or a final. We have almost completed pulling all our closed building permits that will be sent out to be scanned very shortly. As you know, in the report that was passed yesterday and the report Cody just gave that we have somebody started today actually on scanning all our septic records so thank you for approving that yesterday because we had him waiting in the wings, and as soon as it was approved, we sent him a text. We have sent out since our maintenance fee letters. So our first letter telling people that they have until the end of September to close their permits prior to being billed our lovely maintenance fee, as well as this year we started sending out letters to the people that are in between. So permits that are 1 to 2 years old to let them know, hey, you still have an open permit. And we're trying to gear people towards finishing those permits and getting them closed up, or at least, yes, we are. Also, we have been following up on undertaking agreements. I'm not sure if you're aware, but when somebody wants to keep a second cottage on their property while they are constructing a new cottage, we make them enter into an undertaking agreement. We hold securities, and that allows them to reside in the existing cottage until they have occupancy of the new one. And if not, then we have to go after them with that lovely money they gave us to ensure that it is demolished. Also coming up in next year, our chapter for the Ontario Building Officials Association, which is the Muskoka Parry Sound chapter, which I'm the chair of, will be hosting our annual meeting and training sessions. I'm not sure if any of you were around here when we did, I think, last in 2017. But this will be hosted at Deerhurst, and I will be knocking on your doors because we do look for some assistance in people introducing some of our technical sessions and doing some chatting from here to there. So next year, don't be surprised if I'm asking for help.
So should I say thank you, Chair Nicholson? Thank you very much. CEO Mariotti.
Yes, good morning, Council. And
oh, sorry, Councillor Cooper stuck his hand up.
Oh.
You almost got to start.
Sorry, CAO Mariotti, just a quick thing for Kaylee. Thank you for your report and your work. But to the point, I can't believe I'm saying this again, but Councillor Bocek's excellent suggestion. What's going on here? With respect to MOECP inspections, one of the things that I think, as I understand it, if it's a commercial operation, we've had some circumstances in the past whereby building permits have been issued to commercial operations, even though septic is the responsibility of MOECP. We are responsible for the building permits that we issue, correct? So we do
You are correct.
We do have an opportunity to provide, at least at the outset, some oversight, and we should try and avoid what has happened sometimes in the past in terms of that building permit issuance that may have caused some, I think, environmental issues in the future. So there at least there's a tool there at the beginning, which I just wanted to sort of thank our counselor for bringing this to our attention, because I think it is very important to pay attention to. When it's commercial, it can be a massive environmental issue, not a little one. So there's a good reason for paying attention to it, and issuing it, building permits can have an impact. That's all I wanted to say, and I'm sure that you'll do all you can to make sure that the rules are adhered to very strictly. Thanks.
As Chair Nicholson, she has to set a good example. And with that, COA Mariotti.
well, Chair Nicholson is going to be a hard act to follow, but I'll do my best. Yeah, so actually, together with Ms. Nicholson and I, we've spent a fair bit of time talking with various stakeholders here on trying to devise a water quality RFP. And as we're scratching beneath the surface, it's becoming more apparent that we should really do a program design first of what exactly we want to achieve and within the realms of our influence that we can. And so next month, we're going to ask the consultant to come here and talk to council about pivoting over to dedicating time and effort this year and funds this year to actually undertake a thorough program design for how we want to manage our water quality system. And you heard from Mr. Avery as well that really the water quality also goes hand in hand with the septic reinspection program. So now this is growing somewhat, where you're going to have an integrated approach between water quality and analysis and at the back end in terms of the septic system management. Yeah, it's interesting. We want to make sure we get this right. We don't want to just keep doing testing for testing's sake. We want to have a reason, a raison d'etre as to why we're testing and the parameters that we're testing that do give us a full picture. Ms. Nicholson mentioned climate change. You know, it's an interesting concept, and you know, by going out there and measuring bacteria, for example, is not going to give us the solution to a broader issue that could be related to climate change. So long and short, we're going to have Generations Effect come to talk more to council next month about possibly diverting funds to carry out a more thorough program design, and so, you know, council can either choose to add additional funds to that or divert the funds that we had allocated to do testing this year, and do the design first for 24 to then implement the program in 25. I do want to say that there does continue to be testing that is carried out via the district, via the Muskoka Watershed Council, by the Georgian Bay Area Foundation, by the MECP, and by the SSEA. So that does continue to be monitoring. Yeah, we'll probably talk more about this in detail next month. On the OPP detachment boards, council has received communication from Penetanguishene. There is going to be an info session tonight. And so this is related to this new act, this Community Safety and Policing Act that's coming into effect this year. And for our township, as you know, we have two detachments being served by two detachments, Bracebridge and Southern Georgian Bay. And with that, the way things stand, we would then fall under two detachment boards, which we're trying to see together with the district and the Solicitor General's office and the OPP to see if we can streamline this, ideally fall under one OPP detachment and therefore one board. But I'll have more information for council sometime next month. And then going on to the revenue optimization and fees review. So staff have had a couple of meetings with two consulting firms. They have submitted their proposals, which are very close cost-wise. So we're just finalizing their submissions for to take a final choice. And again, next month we'll have a bit more of an update as to who is going to be doing the work and timelines associated with that. But the intent is to kind of grab some low-hanging fruit from that study to implement some kind of revenue-generating ideas for the 2025 budget. And last but not least, the Roma delegation on the floating accommodations was a successful one. Councillor Bocek joined us for Georgian Bay Township. Minister Graydon Smith continues to be very supportive on this issue, and I've reached out to my colleagues from the province and across the country for feedback as to whether this is an issue that is happening elsewhere. And I've heard from the city of Yellowknife. I've heard that they have an issue, so as far afield as there. So I'll be following up with them, and that's it for me.
Councillor Hazelton, you had a question?
Yes, I just listening to the last comment. I guess it's appropriate for a field trip to Yellowknife to Uh, If I, if I could, back to your first topic on water quality. If my memory serves me correct, council started off wanting to create a working group where we could discuss and make progress on water quality topics. And that then it shifted to our CAO finding someone who would potentially participate in some process. The understanding that we had at the time was that there would be one or more committee of the whole sessions where he would come and discuss with us in an open environment. And of course, that hasn't happened. And we did get a few snippets from him. But when I look back at what we have done as a township prior to me being a councillor, we had a water quality committee. We had people from the community. In this township, we have an enormous amount of resources of people who are interested, who are very, very expert in these kinds of topics. And I would hate for us to go and start spending money in the kind of the 30, 50K range, like you're suggesting, when I think we have an opportunity to leverage the expertise we have. And I'll just kind of reflect back on, I think the name Carl Schaefer is a name that most of us know of. So a lot of us knew him. And when it comes to expertise at water quality testing in Georgian Bay, I would say that nobody comes close. And I conducted a meeting in 2005 where I brought SSEA, the district, the Watershed Council, and Carl all together. And we had a very long session. And we concluded that they really didn't know what they were talking about when it came to Georgian Bay. So from my perspective, the inland lakes may have value, but when it comes to dealing with the waters in Georgian Bay, we need other kinds of expertise. Dr. Patchow Fraser, for example, is the first.
Councillor Hazelton, your 2.5 minutes is more than up, and I think we should recognize that next month it's going to be on the agenda.
I understand that, but
Okay.
I think the intent here is we're going in a direction of spending a bunch of money to go in a consulting route. And if we know we have expertise in the community, we should be starting now to bring them together so that we can leverage that expertise so we don't have to go and spend this money.
And next month we'll be discussing whether or not we should be spending that money.
And
Nothing happens instantly. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, I don't know that I, after just that transaction of comments, maybe my question is redundant. Right now we have in past years had Patchow Fraser doing testing. And I don't see that she's doing testing based on your water quality report there currently. Do we still have Patchow Fraser doing her testing?
I believe I'm looking over at Ms. Nicholson. I believe we're due to have a final report from Patchow Fraser for the 2023.
Okay, and we'll go from there.
And then we can go from there. Yes, but
okay.
Just to Councillor Hazelton's point, and he does make a good point, because we do want to have input from our stakeholders within the community who have who have the background and the knowledge. So any further study that requires, if council goes ahead and decides to undertake this program design, because we do have a lot of history, we do have a lot of tests that have been done in the past, but we don't really have a fundamental underlying document to say this is what the township of Georgian Bay wants to achieve. And I think that is what we want to have, the underlying document to say, okay, this is how we want to achieve water quality in the township, with input from various stakeholders. But we do need to rely on the professionals who do this day out, to do this day in and day out, to help us create a document, even though we have a lot of expertise out there.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, CAO Mariotti, for your report. I have couple of areas I'd like to focus. One is on the water quality RFP, a couple of very brief observations. I know we're going to discuss this in March, I should say, but a couple of points. One is that Dr. Pat Chow-Fraser has been doing water quality testing for us for years. Her report generally comes in the spring, so this is not a new situation. So I just want to be clear that everybody understand that she's not dragging her feet. It's a very, very comprehensive report that is produced, and it does take some time, including testing over the winter months of the water, some of the vials of water that are frozen actually, and then tested. So I think it's important to understand that you're not going to get a report in, November on things that can't really happen until the spring. So I think that's important to note. It'd be lovely to, well, it's not even the end of the year in November, is it really? So, but on the other issue with water quality is I think we discovered over time that the work that transpired by SSEA in Honey Harbor did not meet the kind of standards nor the frequency, or in fact, we didn't have any testing for 2 or 3 or 4 years in Honey Harbor. So I think any testing that we've had done, and the comprehensive testing by Dr. Pat Chow-Fraser, has been in Honey Harbor. So I'm failing to understand this one piece here under North and South Bay in Honey Harbor. Severn Sound, fine, but the other ones I'm not getting. So I'm mystified by that particular move, when I think the council directed that at one point that the testing would be done in Honey Harbor by exclusively by Dr. Pat Chow-Fraser. So I'd like to make that note. On the OPP, the only question I had with respect to the OPP, and I know this is now going over a horrible 2.5 minutes, but I just would like to say that just a sort of an understanding from you, CAO Mariotti, from a practical perspective, the northeast portion of our township, namely particularly MacTier, how is that going to be well serviced from the Midland Penetang detachment when it's really quite adjacent to Bracebridge? It's a pretty short drive. It's the only area that is easily accessed either way because of the lack of sort of east-west corridors on the roads. And so I'm a little bit perplexed as how is the Midland detachment going to handle MacTier in particular? Thank you.
I don't want to speak out of turn for the OPP, but my understanding is that we might be administered under one detachment. However, there is always that relationship between the OPP, that if they require the OPP from even Perry Sound to come down and assist, they will do that in a similar manner that we have the agreements with fire assistance. So I don't see OPP coverage as being a boundary simply because we may be under a Bracebridge detachment or we may be under a Southern Georgian Bay detachment. The coverage is going to be township wide. So, yeah.
Further clarification. So that makes sense. I think what you're saying is the oversight, in a sense, could come from the Midland detachment, but we might get actually servicing for MacTier as an example, because it's just practical. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, the OPP has something they call borderless service, which means if there's a call, they figure out which cruiser is the closest, and it could be somebody from headquarters driving up to Perry Sound, and when they have a call in Port 7, they say, "Oh, you're on the highway right there." So, and I think that if capital I, capital F, if we were to go towards one detachment, then the OPP themselves would be looking at how they manage it. And whether or not, I mean, the OPP have talked in our past and currently sometimes about having I'll call it an office on the 400 to serve this stretch of the 400, and I could see that possibly as being part of their approach, just like the Bracebridge detachment has a sub-office in the Bala area. But the conversations are definitely at the preliminary stage at this point.
Just further understanding, if you don't mind. So it sort of sounds to me like right now we're dealing with, we've got two parents, but they're divorced. So we don't need that divorce situation. We want one pair of parents or one parent, so to speak, and that would look after the township of Georgian Bay as opposed to these sort of different factions.
There's less than a handful of municipalities in this province that are served by more than one detachment board, and we're one of those.
Right, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Jarvis. Sorry, did I already do you? Okay, Councillor Bocek. Yeah, I don't see. You're confusing me, but I did see Councillor Bocek's hand.
Yeah, I'm going to just touch on the OPP thing as well too. I mean, most of us that have been around here long remember when the Scotiabank was here in the parking lot and the OPP detachment was in the same building with them, and then we had a detachment in MacTier too. There was an office in MacTier. So I think it's quite reasonable to start to negotiate bringing this all under one umbrella, one detachment, and then maybe talk about sub-offices to service our area. I think this is probably one of the most important things going into 2025. If we can accomplish this, I think it would be fantastic.
All right, thank you. Okay, sorry, I got to get the right screen here. So we talked about that. I think I might as well make the comment now. You talked about the Roma delegation of floating accommodations. I think some of you know, I don't know if all of you know, that tomorrow evening I'll be meeting with the the federal Minister of Transportation on the topic of floating accommodations, a meeting that I've requested 18 months ago or something. I can't remember exactly when. So I'm quite thrilled about that. And I do think Transport Canada is moving on the topic, if from a fairly different direction than we initially had requested. So, yeah.
To that point, I think it's important to know that when the delegation was done to the Minister, Graydon Smith, one of the important issues that we brought up was conversation between our mayor, other mayors, and the feds, because it was very important that the message got to the federal level, because that's where the
stumbling block is radar. Hey, that's cool. This is God.
Somebody,
What am I?
You get your computer and you're not.
I am.
Your microphone. You're on. There you go.
okay. No, and Minister Smith is well aware of my meeting tomorrow, as are roughly a dozen mayors. So I get to speak with quite a few voices, and so I'm looking forward to that. So next, our clerk's department.
So we only had 3 meetings in January for our no meetings January break. Which is still less than normal, so that gave us some extra time to catch up on some administrative tasks, like updating some of our cemetery forms. We talked about the Georgian Bay Land Trust yesterday with their conservation easement, so I'm not going to repeat that. Been working with Moose Deer First Nations in regards to their 51 parcels of road allowances that we are transferring to them, that the province is generously funding. So that has been a very time-consuming task and is still ongoing.
You did make the January 31st deadline. You hoped.
We made a deadline to secure funding, but it is not finalized.
Okay.
How does that sound?
That sounds
There is more parcels that need to be surveyed than was originally anticipated, so that's part of the delay there. But hopefully, if it stays mild, then maybe we can get things surveyed sooner rather than waiting to the springtime. Obviously, we know the procedural bylaw was updated, so communications was sent out on that. Working forward with the cemetery, which I already mentioned. The biggest thing was we were able to spend a lot of time dealing with what was our offsite records. Now that we have the 450 boxes at the old school in Honey Harbor, it gives us a place that we can easily access to sort it through. Because they hadn't been managed adequately when they were off-site, as in like keeping up with retention and that type of thing. So we have 150 boxes that are currently ready to purge. This goes back to Kaylee and Cody's presentation on being able to ensure that we have access to our records. So there's lots of building records and planning files that are there that hopefully as we identify them and sort through them, we can identify which ones need to be scanned and get those in our system so we have access to all of our records. That's my summary.
Thank you. Next on the list is financial services. Is our acting treasurer giving this report or?
Good afternoon, Council.
Or deputy treasurer?
How's everybody this afternoon? Well, actually still morning. Sorry about that.
It's still morning.
It feels like afternoon already. So just a few updates here. User fee bylaw, we have planned to have that updated in 2024 as per our work plan, and we will continue to aim for that. The audit is well on its way. We've just completed the interim audit. Should have everything finalized probably before the end of the second quarter, but we're almost at the end of the first quarter, so I don't promise anything for the end of March. Interim taxes are going out today and yesterday. We've printed and we were mailing out yesterday and today. And I just included a few statistics just to give council an idea of how many transactions we process. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do the amount of transactions per se, but more on the dollar figure side of things. I will work towards doing the other data side of things next month with Town Suites. But just to give you a little bit of idea in total revenue for the month of January, we did about 1.1 million, and it's broken down in different ways of how we've collected those funds. So whether it be through cash, credit card, online, EDIs, which are electronic data transfers, and then how many bills we've paid, or how much we've paid in bills. So for accounts payable, we've paid a total of $674,000. Just a few fun facts to consider. So we are trying to encourage people to use the Town Suites portal, which currently right now we have all of our tax bills online. We hope to increase that to have people book, say, the arena online. They can go get news information online. So far, we have 405 users, of which 279 had logged on within the last month. We'll keep increasing that number as we issue tax bills and we keep promoting it through newsletters. So we hope to see a large intake here with the interim billing that we've just sent out. Another interesting thought is pre-authorized payments. So those are when we take money directly out of people's accounts for their taxes. We currently have 1,972 properties registered on this program of 8,000. So it's about 25% of our tax roll. Ultimately, we would love to see that go up, but I don't think that it's something that has as high as a increase or an enrollment rate as maybe our portal does. We're focusing more on having people registered for the portal. The acting director did provide a little bit of an update here, which is that she attended a few staff meetings with the CAO and the finance and IT teams to discuss January work plans and issue our questions. She completed a few reports for council, and she's working on the DC study, the development charges study. IT has also provided a short, brief description here of their work over the past month, but I won't repeat too much as I'm not as familiar with that aspect of things.
All right, well, thank you very much. Councilor Hazelton.
Thank you, Celine. I have an unrelated question, and that is, could you please send me a copy of the 2024 budget, which I can't find online?
That's correct, because it was only approved yesterday, so it wasn't posted online.
Yeah, I understand it was approved yesterday, but yesterday all we had was a kind of a snapshot, high level, as opposed to the detail. So is that something you could send me?
I
Or
sure can.
thank you.
Right. I'm going to suggest a quick 5-minute bio break because the chair needs one. And then we'll get to Chief Van Dam. Chief Van Dam, if you can just be patient with me for a few minutes.
10-4.
Oh, were we not on? Oh, well, I was muted. I'll try one more time. Chief Van Dam, thank you for your patience. Please go ahead with your report.
Good morning, Council. There's only 5 minutes left in the morning, but we'll try to get out of here before that. So the fire department responded to 21 calls in the month of January. That's on the same pace as last year, which unfortunately was a record-breaking years for calls for the department. The update on training is now we are starting our ice water rescue a little bit early this year because of the ice conditions. Can let council know that we were called to an ice rescue situation on the weekend, and unfortunately we were not successful. As part of capital, the portable pump that is mounted in pump 1 for firefighting, or in marine 1 for firefighting, is in the process of being replaced. Pump has been ordered, and we're hopefully to see that within the next month so that it's ready for the beginning of the season. The fire department applied for some federal grant money to working with forest fire education and some forest firefighting equipment. We've done that in partnership with Moose Deer Point as well to try to get some equipment for that department in the process. We've started our implementation of our new software, First Due. That is going to be an interesting project. A lot of time involved in that one. And our master fire plan and community risk assessment. We've had our kickoff meeting. We've had some meetings with the Lumex group, and they are planning to come to council next month to give you an idea of what the process they're going to go through. As of yesterday, our decontamination program for cancer prevention is still going forward, so that's a positive. And then for bylaw highlights, you can see there the stats for the bylaw department, and some very positive things with the administration part. You can see now the short-term rentals and the AMPS program has been taking up a fair amount of our time. But one of the biggest things that I'm excited for is the research into the charging fees for the private boat slips. Karina has done some work with that, and including engaging some of the marina owners, and the boating association contacted us as some of the marina owners were raising some questions in that, and the boating association president has had a meeting with Karina and has been very positive about what council's concerns are and helping to address those. So those conversations will stay hopefully ongoing here in the next little while, and we can prepare a report to come to council shortly. And that's roughly about it.
Thank you very much. One thing that I'm just going to mention, but is that one of the things you were doing, I remember yesterday with the ANTS program, is talking about the plate renewal as being sort of one of the tools that you can use if people are refusing to pay their fines. And I just read this morning, a couple of minutes ago, that apparently the Ford government is going to now get rid of license plate renewals. So I don't know how that's going to affect that tool, but just some scary thing. No,
yeah, I'm not aware of that or the details. So it could be that your license plates, you still have to have license plates that are valid, but the renewal fee and that stuff may not be there. So we'll be following that one closely as we move forward.
And then just for clarification, 2 years ago he canceled the fees, but you still had to renew your plates. Over 1 million people have not, and now he's decided that you don't even have to renew your plates anymore. Yeah. That's what the one headline said. They had no details.
So did you know when you get a license plate renewal, it doesn't tell you what vehicle it's for? So if you have multiple vehicles in your family, including snowmobiles or ATVs, you have no idea what the renewal notice is for.
Well,
It's absolutely absurd.
we could get into discussing that whole program and how it was handled, but let's not.
A massive fail. There you go.
Sorry, Chief, any questions? All right, well, thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
Very sorry to hear of the fatality, and absolutely our condolences to the families that involved. It's always sad news.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning.
Ms. Buchanan.
Actually, good afternoon since it's 12
I
o'clock
have
now.
I
But
have
thank you.
to
I'm up
get
next.
used to that. Human resources.
Yes. Okay, so January is a busy time of year for payroll as we finalize 2023 year end and also prepare and work on updates for 2024. It's also been a busy month for recruitment. So we're in the process of hiring for 3 full-time permanent positions, as well as 7 summer student positions. We applied for the Canada Summer Jobs Grant, so that's for all summer student positions. We'll find out whether we're approved for funding in the spring. We also send out monthly health and safety emails to all staff. So January's health and safety topic was fire safety in the workplace. I'm working with the deputy fire chief to organize a fire drill and fire extinguisher training for staff. And then some other health and safety training I just thought I'd mention. So we're working with the North Simcoe municipalities to organize automotive hoist training for mechanics. That's nice because we'll be able to keep our costs down by working with Tay, Midland, Penetanguishene, and Tiny. We're also sending our newest member of the Joint Health and Safety Committee to Joint Health and Safety Certification Training. And then we'll have outdoor staff complete personal protective equipment refresher training. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on some upcoming projects in the HR department. So those are Town Suite's payroll module implementation, compensation and pay equity review, collective bargaining preparation, and finally, the employee engagement team is reviewing the 2023 employee engagement survey results. So more information to come about that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cooper.
And you thought you'd get away. Thanks for the report. I did have something that's really maybe a question for you, for the clerk and the CAO. But it's something that's sort of come up over the last couple of days, and that is I would very much appreciate some feedback from you three with respect to the concept of having putting together an orientation program for not only our employees, but our counselors. And we talked recently, the last couple of days, about things like having historical information so that we know what we're looking after here. There will be other information in orientation, including what are some of the sciences that we can consult with respect to a variety of different things, the environment and the geology and all those kinds of things, because it's a very unique area. And so this isn't Markham and a farmer's field. This is quite a bit different. And so I would just ask that maybe the CAO and the clerk and yourself give some consideration to an orientation session for everybody, both council, as I said, and our staff, as people join us, but those who are with us, that we could go through some sort of program. And I would volunteer some of the historical material, which I already have in PowerPoint presentation format, because I thought it was important to have this information in front of our entire team. We're talking about team building, by the way, at the moment. So anyway, I just would encourage that we think about that. And I think there were a few heads yesterday nodding about the concept of understanding our history in particular, but maybe a lot of other things. So for your consideration, and maybe CAO Mariotti, you could come back to us with some feedback from staff as to something like this, especially if we can provide you with a lot of information up front. There's things like PowerPoint presentation I talked about, but Councillor Hazelton here referenced a Dr. Carl Schaefer, and he gave a very interesting presentation to the Georgia Bay Association not too long ago. You know,
It's a fair number of years ago now.
Yeah, but it's exceedingly relevant in terms of what the science is on Georgian Bay and in the Georgia Bay Township area, actually. And it could be, it's a video, it might be 15 minutes long or something like that, but there's another very good piece that is astoundingly good, in my view. I think others that saw that would feel the same way. So I just offer up, there are a lot of pieces that are available to us, and maybe we could pull something together over time, and I'd be more than happy to provide whatever I can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I recall seeing that PowerPoint presentation that Councillor Cooper is referring to, and there's a lot of information in there. I think it's something like 70 or 80 slides. So I think some if there's a way to condense that somewhat in 15 to 20 slides, then that would be amazing. We can we can make that part of the welcome package to say that this is where you're coming to work. So if there's a way to condense that somewhat, Councillor Cooper, staff can go in and have another look at it.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Buchanan. Director Sokash, operations. Have you done anything last month?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks to the wonderful weather we've had, we have done nothing. So, whoever's next, please. So a couple of highlights. Right now, we're in the process of interviewing for the recreation supervisor. We're all really looking forward to that position being filled. It'll take a lot of weight off of both Mike, who you met yesterday, and myself and Vivian, as well as our lead hand and other staff in the rec department. We had ammonia training for the staff at the arena this recently, so they are up to date now and operating the rink. A bit of good news, we've met with the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit regarding the public water tap in Honey Harbor at the new library, and that will be opened up around April 15th. We're still waiting their formal response, but verbally they've said we're good to go. With this weather, we've had a lot of freeze thaw, which leads to a lot of potholes, so we've been doing the best we can with them. One nice thing is the district has listened to our pleas for help insofar as we spend so much time patching a couple of their holes that we don't have the ability to keep up with ours. So we now have a contractor that the district pays for 100% to do some of the pothole work on their roads so we can address our roads. Not saying call us tomorrow, but we're doing a better job on ours, and we will be able to keep up. Now, this nice weather that we've had has allowed us to free up staff to start cutting down some of the dead trees that you see along the roads. As you know, there's been quite a die-off in the last couple of years, so we're working on that, and they've been doing a great job with that. What else? We're working on getting quotations to upgrade our lighting as well as security cameras. We've had a couple of thefts here. I'm not sure if you heard about one in the summer. We had some flower pots stolen, and while we have the person on camera, unfortunately, we're not able to identify the person or their license plate, even though they drove right by the camera. The lighting wasn't good enough. We also had another theft where somebody went into the back of our yard. They spent a lot of time around the grader, which was really spooky for us because that's our most expensive piece of equipment. They then went through a bunch of vehicles. We couldn't find anything that was stolen. This was in the middle of the night. They did steal the charger for the electric vehicle. We got off lucky there because it is locked in place, so they kicked it out, and any damage that was done to release the mechanism appears to have been to the cord and not to the vehicle. So we were able for $900 to get another charger. We did some snow removal in Mactier and Oak Bay, and I think most of you heard about the results in Oak Bay. Beaver dams are another concern that we're having to deal with right now without, since we didn't have as big of a freeze as we're used to. There is more water moving. We've lost a couple of beaver dams, and one did cause quite a bit of damage out on 12 Mile Bay Road. At the end of the road, there was about a foot of ice built up on the road. If it was just a foot thick right across, that would have been okay, but unfortunately cars were driving through it while it was flowing, so there's a foot of ice and then ruts, and car vehicles are different widths. So we've been doing the best we can there. And finally, we are meeting with the contractor who deals with spraying our Mighty shortly in order to get it sprayed this spring. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Seeing no hands raised, appreciate all the work that you're doing along with everybody else. And now we're going to go to Director Whitlip. Have you done any planning this past month? No? It's probably the building department slowing them down.
Thank you, Mayor Coots, here through you to council. I'll provide a high-level summary of the information that I'm sure council's all read in the report. And this summary just looks at January of 2024. Planning applications are significantly up from this time last year. Most of those have been in the form of new minor variance applications. Thankfully, with the complement of staff that we have, we are able to keep up and are current with new planning applications and ongoing planning applications that are in progress. During January, we worked on a number of ongoing document-related matters and process improvements that include updating our planning application forms, notices of decisions, to ensure that they comply with current requirements of the legislation and to provide for ease of use and clarity for customers. And our planner, Shania Wanfor, has been instrumental on that end of things. Also been working, led mostly by Planner 2, Jeff Kratke, working with our solicitor to update our various agreement templates, the priority one of which was the minor variance agreement, which will allow us to implement many of these measures, such as environmentally related controls, et cetera, that are so important to our township. As council knows, we've switched over our minor variance signs to an in-house type of laminated sign, a placard that we provide people rather than requiring them to go out and utilize a sign company to create a sign. And that's just really smoothed the timing for us in terms of ensuring that the signs are posted and issued in a timely manner and are on the site. And it's improved things for our customers as well. And now we're posting planning applications both on our website and in the new electronic display that's in the foyer to provide for better information distribution to the public. Along those lines, as council will know, and certainly our planning advisory committee is aware, we've initiated an official plan amendment to address alternative notice methods. And what that is specific to, and this comes on the heels of a similar amendment that is currently in progress and initiated by the District of Muskoka to their official plan, it's to enable us to still meet the requirements for notification under the Planning Act in the absence of print media, many of which are no longer available. So whenever we have township-wide type planning applications, such as our upcoming official plan update and zoning bylaw review, where we need to inform everybody in the township, currently the Planning Act states that we have to provide notice in the form of a local newspaper of reasonable distribution to cover our planning area. However, the Planning Act also provides for allowing us to use alternative means of notice in the event that there is no such print newspaper. However, we have to have policies in our official plan that say so. So this amendment that is scheduled for a public meeting in April will propose policies to incorporate into our official plan to allow us to provide alternative methods of notice rather than trying to advertise in non-existent print media. I won't spend a lot of time talking about drinking water source protection. Cody Avery spoke to it at length. However, planning staff met with the risk management officer to discuss our annual reporting requirements, most of which Cody had prepared and have passed on to the RMO, risk management officer, and we are up to date there. Planning staff spent a great deal of time in January working with our solicitor to finalize a development agreement related to the marina towns in Oak Bay. This is significant in that the development agreement forms the basis of many of the conditions of condominium approval that need to be cleared. So that agreement has been finalized, is now in the hands of the developer for signing, which I understand is still pending. Another development that's been fairly low key, but is nearing sort of shovel ready or building permit stage perhaps, is Edgewater Estates, which was formerly known as Lone Pine Homes, just up the road here from us. That's a 22 unit 22 unit development consisting of single detached dwellings, but on a common elements condominium road. So the current developer acquired that development several years ago from the previous developer and has been quite active in working to clear the various draft plan conditions, and planning staff have been working on that on a weekly basis to get him to the finish line there. And lastly, there's been a number of ongoing activities. Staff continue to do research into green building incentives. There was some discussion about that. The intent to present something to council in March of 2024. However, would also like to understand and work with council to place that in the priority queue. We are working on a zoning certificate process, which is something council may be familiar with. It's a process which would require planning review of a proposed building permit before it actually is submitted as a building permit application. So that would ultimately streamline timeframes and allow someone, once they submit for a building permit, they already know that they've cleared the planning hurdles, they are in compliance with zoning, and it's really a technical review at that point with building staff. So work is ongoing there for hopefully rollout later this summer. There's also a number of ongoing planning applications that we continue to work on, not the least of which, and I did not highlight it specifically because most of the work was done in the fall and into December and is recently resumed, but that is the official plan amendment for 6 Mile Lake. Planner Jeff Kratke was quite instrumental and has recently met with the parties again, and tremendous progress has been made on that one. And lastly, I was pleased to meet with the first of, and I hope many of, meetings with the various communities in the township. So I met with representatives of the Go Home Bay Association. That was initiated by them, but it was a really good meeting in order to understand what are the issues that are important to them and their community. And like I said, I hope to do that with all the associations as we work our way towards the official plan and zoning bylaw update. So that's my summary, and I'm happy to answer any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hazelton, followed by Councillor Graziano, please, and then Cooper.
He put his physical hand up.
Because nobody had their hands up here, so then I went looking physically, and then when I come back, all of a sudden there's hands.
Hands everywhere.
It's hard to keep track of this, council.
Derek, thank you very much for your report. Maybe I'm sounding like a broken record, maybe not to you, but I'm first of all delighted you're starting this outreach. What you need to be aware of in my ward is that there is no organization that represents broadly the ward. So there are many leaders, if you will, or many people in the community who you would need to meet with to get a view of Ward 4. That probably isn't the case in the other wards. Maybe it is, I don't know, but certainly in my ward it isn't. So I would welcome the opportunity of discussing with you who you may want to reach out to for that kind of insight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Graziano.
I don't mind passing my time off to my colleague here to the left. Clearly, I have a lot more time than he does, so perhaps it's wise that that we pass it on. Peter, did you want to?
No.
Okay, excellent.
We finished?
Derek, thank you for the report. We have a All Presidents Association meeting coming up in the springtime for the inland lakes. And if you'd like to attend, we'd be happy to have you as a delegation there to be able to not only introduce yourself, but at the same time answer any questions and perhaps even coordinate one-on-one conversations outside of the format. So if that brings value to you, then we'd be happy to have you. Just let me know, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Cooper.
Oh dear, my speaker's on. Mic's on. Sorry about that, but yeah, I'll try and keep this to 2.5 minutes. But thanks for the report. A couple of very simple things, but just a suggestion, something that might apply to some of the other reports as well. I find the data that you provided at the beginning very helpful, but it's only 1 month. And what would really help me from an operational performance perspective would be to maybe show the annual number for 2023 in a column before you break into January and that kind of thing, just so that you can say on an annualized basis, we expect, or this is what we did last year. This is sort of the way that one would see anything in any sort of business. And so it's just an annual thing as opposed to a 1 monther. And it also, frankly, we're going to expect, at least I would expect, as we saw at least last year, but not necessarily this year, that the numbers would be relatively low in January, February, March, and April. Why? Hard to do site inspections, which is my next point. I'm hoping that we are careful about the need for site inspections in your department at this time of year. With the snow cover, with the inability to get to certain areas, why is that? As I understand it, it should have been or is a standard that we establish that we need site inspections. And if that is the case, why would an application be complete until the site inspection is complete? So I would ask if you could answer that before I get into my next quick comment.
Certainly, through the mayor to Councillor Cooper. So, and perhaps it's useful to draw a comparison with the building permit and building inspection process. So, under the Building Code Act, inspections are prescribed, and if, for example, building staff are unable to access a site and undertake an inspection, the development cannot proceed. It doesn't pass an inspection. There's no inspection. It cannot go to the next step. That's not quite the same as the planning process. Through the planning process, there's no prescribed or legislated requirement for a site inspection to occur. However, there's a certain professional duty of care, if you will, that all planners follow, and that is to undertake inspections when they can as well. So that puts staff in a position, certainly in the Georgian Bay context, where there are certain times of the year when it is not possible to safely attend a site, and planning staff will not attend a site under those circumstances. Put staff in a position where they must make a determination. Do they have enough available information, whether it's through aerial imagery, mapping, photos sometimes that are supplied by the proponents themselves of the site? Do they have enough information to undertake enough duty of care to have confidence in making a recommendation? To date, staff have, in a number of circumstances, had that confidence and have made recommendations in the absence of site inspections. However, that's generally an exception to the rule. Staff will continue to undertake site inspections when they can, and we may run into circumstances where we find that there is a site that, based on the information we do have, may have issues, whether it's topography or other things, where we may find ourselves unable to make a recommendation without having attended the site firsthand, in which we would identify that in a staff report and likely recommend a deferral. A situation like that certainly potentially opens us up to challenge should an applicant wish to appeal a non-decision under circumstances like that. But again, staff would revert back to that duty of care that as professional planners we would all try and adhere to. But it is not a legislated or mandated requirement, but it's a best practice. That's another way of putting it.
So if I could continue on, I just would comment that what I hope you could come back to us with is a way to make sure that it is prescribed, a requirement to have site inspections. So does the Planning Act say you can't demand site inspections? I suggest not. The other thing I found out from planning lawyers is that there are many municipalities that are running months behind and not getting everything done sort of quickly, and nothing's happening about that. So I think it's important to note that we have a very special place we're trying to look after, and I hope we can come up with a way to make sure that photographs are not really, or aerials are not really going to help us that much when it comes to some really complex topography that we have in this township. So I would ask that we do that. And furthermore, it's not just your department. It's the public that deserve this inspection. And I think our Committee of Adjustment deserves the ability to be able to inspect as well. And if they can't get to a property, why are we hearing it? Maybe it has to be one of the tick marks on our planning regimen. So I would ask if you could come back with some sort of way to deal with that. The other thing I wanted to say is thank you very much for meeting with the Go Home Bay Association. I want to help everybody understand there's two Go Homes. One that was established in about the 1890s. It's called Go Home, and it happens to be Bay. Anyway, because it's a bit confusing. There's two different areas. But back to sort of a point though, meeting with associations like the Go Home Bay Association, Wawatasi, Cognishine, and I would say to you that while it's unfortunate that it's going to be a little bit more complex and Ward 4, I do encourage that we figure out a way to work with Ward 4 for sure. I can tell you that for those other communities that we've talked about, anywhere from 75% to 95% of the residents in those communities, those three that I mentioned, are members of those cottage associations, and each one of them have a planning regimen, and they're pretty determined to keep it. So I think we need to keep that in our mind as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no other hands raised. Ms. Schneier, are you going to argue that we save the best for last?
Without a doubt, Your Worship. So we are coming off the heels of Christmas in our department, or at least in reference to what we have been up to. And both the lower areas of the township and the northern areas of the township all receive gifts for their children. And that is something that started about 3 years ago and is continually improving to increase the dialogue with the MacTier Food Bank. So that was very successful, and I'm so delighted that is also over, because it's a lot of work. Each family member gets a gift, as well as a hamper provided by another community organization, as well as the regular food basket, as well as some items to tie them over the holidays. As the fire chief did mention, we did apply for a wildfire grant, and parking tags are now here, so you can grab yours today if you would like to, and they are valid in all Township of Georgian Bay parking lots. And the short-term rental sustainability plan is underway, and people are putting in their applications with their 10 actionable items, so that is really exciting to see that is moving forward. And We are working with various lake associations. We've heard from Cognasheen, Gloucester Pool, 6 Mile, about their applications for municipal grants. And so we will be processing them at the end of this month. And then also the greenhouse gas emission study is moving along quite nicely. All the buildings have now been assessed and they're in the final processes of doing analysis and recommendations. They're going to come to the sustainable community at the end of February for another stakeholder meeting, one other stakeholder meeting, and then they'll come in front of you to council for review. And there are some telling findings in that, and we're just working on that. So that is the sustainability committee, and I guess we won a little award.
Thank you very much. And if I may, and I think it's worth repeating, a huge thank you goes out to our communities who support the food banks and the folks who are a little more challenged than most of us. And I say the community has really stepped forward. I'll say communities because we have 2 different food banks. We serve quite a large area geographically. And I think I know that some of the families have really appreciated that support. So that's a huge thank you. Any other questions or comments, Councillor Bocek?
Further to your statement, I really appreciate the work that the food bank has done for these people's pets as well too. That is huge, providing litter and food and etc. for their pets. It's great plan. Thank you.
All right. If there's no questions there, I get to go through a series of closing paperwork. Moved by Councillor Bocek, seconded by Councillor Hazelton. Be it resolved, the Committee of the Whole receives the report regarding January 2024 monthly department highlights for information. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. And I think a big thank you to everyone who's provided all this information. I think it's very useful and informative. And I think going forward, we'll see how some of these stats grow over the year. Oh, all right. Get moved by Councillor Graziano, seconded by Councillor Jarvis. Be it resolved that the Committee of the Whole does now adjourn at 12:32 p.m. to reconvene on March 5th, 2024, or at the call of the chair. All those in favor? And we are adjourned. And thank you very much, Council, for the last day and a half of meeting.